They told me my father died in an accident, clean, simple, tragic. But deep down, I always knew there was more. A shadow hung over his name, whispers buried beneath polished headlines. I am Emily Parker, investigative journalist, and daughter of the man they tried to erase. When I followed the trail he left behind, I uncovered something far greater than I ever imagined, a secret powerful enough to destroy lives, to bring down an empire. And now, they want me gone. Hunted, threatened, nearly silenced, but not broken. Because once you know the truth, there's no turning back. They told me my father's death was an accident, a cruel, but unavoidable mishap. The kind of thing that happens when the world is out of your control. But I never believed them. The way people avoided my eyes when I asked questions, the whispered conversations that stopped as soon as I entered a room, the hollow expressions on their faces, all of it screamed that there was more to the story. I am Emily Parker, an investigative journalist, and the daughter of a man whose life and death were conveniently swept under the rug. But I couldn't let it go. My father wasn't just a victim of bad luck. No, his death was a message, a warning, something orchestrated by those who feared what he had uncovered. I started looking into it, piecing together fragments of information, and quickly realized that his death wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of something far darker. A massive conspiracy that no one wanted exposed. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous the waters became. There were people in power who would do anything to protect their secrets, and now, they were coming for me. Every phone call I received, every shadow I saw out of the corner of my eye, made my heart race. They were hunting me, trying to silence me before I could uncover the truth. But I couldn't stop. Not now. My father's voice echoed in my mind, "The truth matters, Emily. Always." And so, I pressed on, with every ounce of courage I had, knowing that if I didn't expose what happened to him, no one else would. But with every step, I could feel them closing in, the danger growing as my resolve hardened. I couldn't back down. Not when justice was this close. The more I delved into my father's death, the more the world around me seemed to shift into a terrifying, unfamiliar landscape. What had once been a straightforward investigation, a daughter seeking justice for her father, quickly turned into something darker, more insidious. Every lead I chased down seemed to vanish as quickly as it appeared, and the deeper I dug, the more the shadows seemed to stretch, closing in on me from all sides. My heart was constantly pounding, a dull, persistent thrum in my chest, as though it knew the danger I was walking into, even if I was too stubborn to admit it. I had always considered myself someone who thrived under pressure, someone with a clear sense of purpose. But now, that confidence was starting to crack. The small, unsettling signs, a car that seemed to follow me just a little too closely, a figure watching me from across the street, the feeling of eyes on me even when I was in my apartment, began to coalesce into something undeniable. I was being watched. They were watching me. And the more I resisted, the more the threat grew. My once peaceful apartment now felt like a trap. I couldn't sit down to eat or sleep without feeling the gnawing sense that someone was just outside, waiting for me to make a mistake. My hands would shake as I sifted through the files on my desk, every scrap of paper, every photograph, now a potential death sentence. But the worst moment came one rainy evening. I had been out, following up on a tip, when I got home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart dropped into my stomach. There was no sign of forced entry, no sign of struggle, just the unnerving feeling that something had been disturbed, as though someone had been rifling through my personal things, trying to find out just how close I was to the truth. I moved cautiously, my breath shallow as I scanned every corner of the room. My desk had been disturbed, papers scattered across the floor, my laptop missing. Panic rose in my throat like bile, but I refused to give in. I had to find the answers. I had to finish this for my father, for everything he had lost. It wasn't long before I received the first direct threat. The phone call came late at night, the voice on the other end distorted, chilling. "Stop now, Emily," the voice warned, cold and unfeeling. "You're asking questions that don't have answers. People like you don't make it out alive." A shiver crawled down my spine, but I didn't let myself break. Not yet. I tried to shake off the unease, but the next day, things escalated further. As I was heading home from work, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The message was brief, simple, yet it felt like a dagger through my chest. "You're next." I couldn't ignore it. The words, the voice, the unmistakable threat that loomed over me, they were all too real now. They wanted me silenced. But I couldn't back down. Not now. Not when I was so close. I had to keep pushing, no matter how many dangers lay ahead. That evening, I met James Walker, a former investigator who had once worked for the very corporation I was exposing. He was supposed to be an ally, a source who could help me navigate the labyrinth of lies. But when I saw him that night, his face pale and wide-eyed with fear, I knew something had gone terribly wrong. "Emily," he whispered urgently, grabbing my arm. "You need to stop. You don't know what they're capable of. They'll destroy you." His voice was shaking, his eyes darting nervously over his shoulder. He was terrified, and it was hard not to let his fear seep into me. But I couldn't stop. My mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle, to understand the scope of what I was up against. "Who's behind all of this, James?" I asked, my voice low, my throat tight. "Who's pulling the strings?" But before he could answer, a car screeched to a halt just a few feet away. The headlights blinded me, and the door swung open with a sharp thud, sending a cold jolt through my body. I didn't have time to think. James grabbed me by the arm, his grip tight, his face set in grim determination. "Run," he hissed, before disappearing into the shadows of the alley, his footsteps muffled by the rain. My pulse hammered in my ears as I hesitated for only a split second, but it was enough. I bolted, my legs carrying me through the empty streets, the sound of pounding footsteps echoing behind me, drawing closer with every breath. I couldn't look back. There was no time. My only thought was survival. The truth could wait. For now, I had to stay alive long enough to expose it. My heart was racing, the thudding of it deafening in my ears as I dashed through the rain-soaked streets, desperately trying to escape the grip of those hunting me. My mind was a blur of fear and adrenaline, my body on autopilot as I pushed myself harder. Every step felt like it could be my last, every corner I turned could lead to an ambush. I couldn't stop. Not now, not when I was so close. I didn't have a clear plan anymore, my mind was too fogged by the panic flooding my senses. All I knew was that I had to get away. I had to keep running, keep moving, because every second I stayed in one place, the closer they got. The footsteps behind me grew louder, faster. Whoever it was, they were getting closer, and my already frayed nerves were on the brink of snapping. I rounded another corner, my breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The alley was narrow, the dampness of the city air filling my lungs with the sour smell of decay. My fingers grazed the brick wall beside me as I skidded to a halt, my eyes scanning frantically for any way out. I knew the streets well enough to know I was cornered, my escape routes were quickly narrowing. They knew the city better than I did. I couldn't keep running forever. The weight of that truth settled heavily in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I slipped into a derelict building at the end of the alley, hoping against hope that the rusty door would hold long enough to give me a moment of respite. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. They were relentless. The men who worked for Harrington Corporation. They were everywhere now, in every shadow, and they wouldn't stop until I was silenced, just like they had done to my father. The door barely creaked as I shoved it open, the smell of mildew and rot stinging my nose as I ducked inside. The darkness enveloped me like a suffocating blanket, but I barely noticed. I was too consumed by the fear that gripped me, by the gnawing certainty that I was running out of time. The dilapidated warehouse was a maze of rusted metal and broken machinery. I could hear the sounds of water dripping somewhere deep in the building, but it was the eerie silence that pressed on me the hardest. It was as if the entire world had gone still, waiting. I moved cautiously through the shadows, trying to make as little noise as possible, every step feeling like a betrayal of my need for silence. My body was on edge, every instinct screaming at me to get out, to keep running. But where could I go? I had no more safe places. The walls were closing in. I slid behind a stack of crates, my heart hammering so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I clutched my phone tightly in my hand, the only thing that tethered me to the outside world. But I couldn't risk making a call. Not yet. They were watching, waiting, and I didn't know who I could trust anymore. James had been my ally, my only source of real help, but now I feared I had led him into the crosshairs as well. The thought of him, of what had happened to him, twisted my gut into a knot of guilt and rage. Suddenly, a voice broke through the stillness, making my skin crawl. "We know you're here, Emily," it called out, low and deliberate. The sound of it was like ice running through my veins. I froze. The voice sent a jolt of terror through me, and I instinctively pressed myself further into the shadows, trying to make myself as small as possible. It was a man's voice, though it took me a moment to recognize it. "Don't run," he continued, his voice almost casual, like he was discussing the weather. "We know every inch of this city. You can't hide from us." His words were laced with a chilling confidence, the kind of certainty that comes from power, power that had already silenced countless others before me. My breath hitched, and my pulse quickened. They weren't just looking for me. They were coming for me. This wasn't just about silencing the story anymore. This was personal. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of my phone. It felt like the only thing keeping me anchored to the truth, the only thing that could save me. But even then, I hesitated. What was the point of calling for help when no one could reach me in time? The man's voice grew closer, his footsteps slow and deliberate. He was toying with me now, enjoying the fear he could feel radiating from me. His words echoed through the warehouse, each one punctuated by the sound of his steps. "You should have stayed quiet. You should have walked away. But now, you've made this personal." My throat tightened as I swallowed hard, my mind scrambling for a way out. I had no weapons, no allies nearby, and no place to run. Every direction felt like it led back to them. They had planned for this, they knew I would try to escape. The thought that I was already trapped here, alone, felt suffocating. I needed to think. I needed a plan. But just as I was starting to gather my thoughts, I heard the unmistakable sound of a gun being drawn, that sharp, metallic click. My breath caught in my throat as I pressed my back harder into the cold stone wall. "You have one chance, Emily," the voice continued. "You tell us everything you know about the files, about the investigation, or we make this permanent." The chill of their threat was like ice in my veins, and for a moment, the world around me seemed to freeze. It was no longer just about getting away. It was about survival. I had a choice. Give up the truth, or die trying to protect it. A wave of anger surged through me, sharp and hot. I wasn't going to die here. Not like this. Not when I was so close. I reached for the door, the cold metal under my fingers a small comfort, but as I turned to move, the voice called out again. She's not going anywhere. And then, the silence was shattered by the deafening crack of a gunshot. The gunshot was deafening. It exploded through the air, so sharp and sudden that it took me a moment to realize what had happened. The sound pierced my ears and vibrated deep within my chest, setting every nerve in my body on fire. I stood frozen, a bead of cold sweat trickling down my spine, my breath caught in my throat. I was almost certain I hadn't been hit, but the sheer proximity of the shot sent waves of panic surging through me. I forced myself to move. I couldn't stop now, not when I had come this far. My heart hammered wildly in my chest, each beat louder than the last, as if it were trying to escape the cage of my ribcage. Every muscle screamed in protest, but I clenched my jaw and willed myself forward. If I stopped now, they'd catch me. I couldn't afford that. Not when I was so close to the truth. My legs felt like lead, each step heavy and sluggish. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay, the dim lighting casting long, cruel shadows across the cold concrete floor. I didn't dare to look back. I couldn't afford to waste even a second. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what to do next. The exit? Could I make it? My brain screamed at me to run, but my body felt as though it was rebelling against me, fighting the very movement I was commanding it to make. I could hear their footsteps behind me now, heavy and relentless, punctuating the silence with each stride. They were closing in. The sound of their boots hitting the ground was like a countdown in my head, ticking away my final seconds of freedom. A wave of nausea rose in my throat as I rounded a corner, but I swallowed it down, forcing myself to focus. Focus, Emily. Ahead, I spotted it, the door. Just a sliver of an opening at the far end of the warehouse. A tiny sliver of hope. My heart skipped a beat as I pushed my aching body to move faster. The door was so close, yet so far. I was running on pure instinct now, everything else fading away. The only thing that mattered was getting to that door, to the freedom that lay beyond it. I stumbled as I neared the door, my legs threatening to give way beneath me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. A voice inside me, one I barely recognized as my own, screamed, urging me forward. I reached out, my hand trembling as I grabbed the handle, yanking it with all my strength. The door creaked open, and I practically threw myself through it, into the alley outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap to the face, a brief moment of clarity in the chaos that had engulfed me. But that clarity was fleeting. I barely had time to process what had happened before the sound of screeching tires split the air behind me. A car. It was coming toward me, fast. The light from the headlights sliced through the darkness, blinding me for a split second as I stumbled forward, my breath coming in ragged, panicked gasps. I turned, fear gripping me like a vice. The car was coming at me, and in that split second, I realized I wasn't out of danger yet. Far from it. I could hear their voices, the men who had been chasing me. Their footsteps, growing louder, their malicious intent pressing against me like a physical force. I had two choices, face the men behind me, or get into that car. I didn't think. I just reacted. I bolted toward the car, throwing myself into the passenger seat without a second glance. The door slammed shut with a deafening thud, and I turned to face the driver. It was James. Relief washed over me like a wave, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this wasn't over. Drive. Now. I choked out, my voice hoarse from the fear, from the near panic that had set in. Without hesitation, James slammed the car into gear, the tires screeching as we tore down the alley, the engine roaring like an angry beast. I could hear the men behind us, but they were too far now. They had lost us, for now. My mind was still reeling from the chaos, my body trembling from the rush of adrenaline that was slowly beginning to ebb away, leaving me exhausted and shaky. I stared out the window, watching the city blur past, but my mind kept racing. I could still hear the echo of their voices, the sharp snap of the gunshot, and the oppressive weight of the danger that hung over me. I wasn't safe yet. I knew that. But for the first time in hours, I felt a faint glimmer of hope. We were still alive. "Are you okay?" James asked, his voice steady despite the tension that crackled in the air. I shook my head, my breath coming in shallow, uneven bursts. "No. Not yet," I replied, my voice raw. "They're going to keep coming. They won't stop until they find me." James nodded, his expression hardening. "We'll deal with it. Together." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that we could make it through this, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. They wouldn't stop. They couldn't. But neither would I. I had a story to tell, a truth to expose, and no matter what they threw at me, I would not let them silence me. I gripped the edge of the seat, my knuckles white, my resolve hardening. "We have to finish this," I muttered, almost to myself. James glanced at me, his eyes full of understanding. "We will. We're not backing down now." The car sped into the night, and with it, I felt the weight of what was to come pressing down on me. The danger wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't running from it. I was running toward it. And I would fight with everything I had. The engine hummed steadily, a reminder of the only constant in this chaos, the car beneath me. Yet, everything else felt out of control. My breath still came in short, sharp bursts as I tried to steady myself, hands gripping the seat, eyes scanning the dark roads around us. The world outside was blurred, a maze of streetlights and empty streets stretching out endlessly, but inside the car, time felt frozen. Every minute that passed, every mile we put between us and the dangers that stalked us, only seemed to amplify the weight pressing down on my chest. James was focused, his eyes locked ahead, his hands firmly gripping the wheel as though driving in the dark would somehow shield us from everything chasing us. His face was a mask of determination, but beneath it, I could see the strain, the same unease creeping into his muscles that I felt clawing at my own insides. We both knew that this wasn't a game. We were on the edge of something much bigger than just escaping. It was about survival. "I can't keep running," I finally said, my voice hoarse, breaking the silence that had stretched between us. My words felt heavy, a stark contrast to the almost serene way James was navigating the streets. "We can't just stay in the shadows forever. We have to fight back." James glanced at me for a fraction of a second, his expression unreadable, before he shifted his gaze back to the road. His face softened, just a little, before he spoke. "We don't have a choice right now, Emily. If we fight head-on, we'll be dead before we can even get close to the truth. The world's not ready for it. And neither are we." I knew what he was saying, I could hear the logic in his voice, but it didn't make me feel any safer. My hands were still shaking, my mind still racing through every possible outcome, none of them good. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that James was right. A head-on confrontation meant death, and I wasn't ready to die, not when I was so close to uncovering the truth. Not when my father's death was still an open wound, one that had yet to be healed. But the idea of hiding, of running, felt like a slow, suffocating death. My father had taught me to fight, not to hide. "We need to expose them." "Now," I said, my voice tight, a sense of urgency bleeding through the calm exterior I tried to maintain. "We've been running long enough. Every moment we waste, they get closer to silencing us, to stopping everything before we can even begin." James's jaw clenched as he pressed the gas pedal harder, pushing the car forward with a new intensity. "I know," he muttered. "And we will. But we need time. We don't have enough evidence yet. If we make one wrong move, we'll be putting ourselves and everyone we care about at risk. We need to be smarter than that." His words cut through me like ice, a cold reminder of the very real danger we were in. My heart pounded, but it wasn't just fear that was driving me now, it was frustration. My father's death was no longer just a personal tragedy, it had become a symbol, a rallying cry for a war that was bigger than just me. The corporation, the lies, the betrayal, it all had to come out. It was no longer a question of if, but when. I stared out the window, watching the city lights flicker past in a blur of orange and yellow, like distant stars. The night was eerily quiet, but beneath that calm, I could feel the tension building. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being hunted, even though there were no cars behind us, no signs of anyone trailing us. The feeling of being watched, of being pursued, was in the air, palpable and suffocating. Every alley we turned down, every dark corner we passed, seemed to whisper the same warning: "You're not safe here. Not now, not ever." "How much further?" I asked, trying to push away the feeling of dread that was settling in my chest like a stone. My voice trembled slightly, but I quickly masked it, trying to keep my composure. "Just a few more blocks," James replied, his voice cool, but I could hear the same tension that I felt in his words. He didn't believe it either. He was just trying to make me feel better. The silence stretched again, but it was different this time. It wasn't peaceful, it was filled with anticipation. With fear. My hand reached up instinctively, brushing my fingers over the scar on my neck, my father's legacy, my reminder that this fight was personal. I wasn't just running for my life anymore, I was running to make sure the truth didn't die with him. As we neared the end of the street, I could feel my anxiety rising. Something was wrong. I wasn't sure what it was yet, but my instincts were screaming at me. I turned to James, my voice low, barely a whisper. "James, do you think they know where we're going?" For a brief moment, he didn't respond. He kept his focus on the road ahead, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the flicker of worry in his eyes that he tried so hard to hide. "They might," he said finally, his voice thick with hesitation. "But we've got a head start. We need to keep moving, quickly." I felt the weight of his words settle over me like a dark cloud, and it only added to the pressure mounting in my chest. We weren't safe. We weren't even close to being safe. We were running out of time, and we had nowhere left to hide. I swallowed hard, forcing my nerves to steady. We were almost there, almost to the safe house that James had promised. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew it wasn't enough. We needed to prepare for what came next. And I wasn't sure if we were ready for the storm that was about to hit. They tried everything to keep me quiet, lies, fear, even blood. But the truth has its own momentum, and once it starts rolling, it doesn't stop. My name has been dragged through the mud, my safety ripped away, but the story is out now. And the world knows who's really behind my father's death. They built their kingdom on silence, but I gave the truth a voice. This fight cost me everything, but I'd do it again. Because justice isn't given. It's claimed. And this is just the beginning.